additional informations, procedures, evidence, and actions, and then they look at the examiner answer, and they start to increase the stress level. Now, I just want to make a quick, crisp clarity on the subject matter. Now, when you look at a scenario, for example, and a scenario asking you to recommend an additional information which the auditor would need, or recommend the procedures, or recommend the evidence, or recommend the actions, you first need to understand the requirement so that you can put into the right answer. Now, just to start quickly, for example, if we start first with the objective is to bring a clarity on additional information, how you write it up, and the clarity on writing procedures, the clarity on evidence, and the clarity on actions. Okay, let's start on with the exercise. Now, when you look at the clarity perspective, and you want to see how to go down with it. Now, first of all, a question asks you, recommend the additional information which you will need, and the question continues. Okay, the next time the question asks you, recommend the principal audit procedures, or as simple as that, recommend the procedures you should perform on whatever, and the question continues. The next question will ask you, explain the evidence you should expect to find in the review of the working paper file in respect of something. The file can be on anything, question mark. Or the question asks you, just 1 minute, or the question asks you to recommend actions necessary. You must have seen this jargon so many times in so many questions of the AAA paper. Now, actions is one thing, evidence is another, procedures is another, and additional information is another. Now, try to understand it quickly. Suppose there is a situation of a goodwill, and the examiner asks you to recommend additional information which you will be needing to perform your work on goodwill. Now, first of all, you need to understand that additional information is taken prior to the start of work. And obviously, it is taken prior to the start of work, or it is taken at the planning stage. And it is taken from the management. You need the information from the management. Who will give you the information? Obviously, the management. Now, additional information is set at the time when you're planning, or is set at the time when you are about to start your work, and the examiner asks you, what additional information will you need to perform your work? Now, the focal point of information is that you need information, right? So if you look at information, information, as simple as that, is the document which you need from management to perform your work. Management to perform your work. Now, the information is a document which you need from the management to perform your work, followed by the reason of using this document. Now, just an example. When you're writing an information, the focal point of an information is a document, right? You cannot start information with a action word like review, recalculate, discuss, because that will automatically become a procedure. Now, for example, if I give you an information on goodwill from like a September 18 exam paper, suppose in a September 18 exam paper, if I can just take a paragraph for an example. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, now suppose there is a exhibit 4 in the September 18 paper on a determination of goodwill on the acquisition of Links company, right? And a goodwill was recognized of $100 million. Now, examiner, for example, asks you in this question, I'm just taking an example, right? Examiner asks you, recommend the additional information which you will need to perform your work on goodwill when you come to the audit. Now you are at the planning stage and you want to take some additional information on goodwill, which you will be needing, which will help you later in the audit of the goodwill. Now, when you look at the goodwill, in the goodwill, they have acquired Links company, right? Acquisition of Links company. Now, for the acquisition of Links company, which must have been taking place during the year, and it's a very important decision of the management to acquire a company. And on the acquisition of this company, a goodwill of $100 million was recognized. So the very first thing I would be needing from the management in terms of an information, I would be needing from the management, number one, the board minutes to confirm. Why would I be needing the board minutes from the management? Why would I be needing this information from the management? I would be needing this information from management to confirm the approval and the rationale of acquiring Links company. So I would ask management that, can you kindly give me the board minutes, because I will be needing the board minutes to confirm the approval and the rationale of acquiring Links company. This is the information. See, the information needs to start with a document. But if I say review the board minutes, it will become a procedure. I'm not writing a procedure, I'm writing an information. So the focal point of an information is a document with a reason, which you need to take from the management. So I need to take a document from the management, the board minutes. What is the reason? To confirm the approval. So this is my additional information. Number two additional information, which I will be needing from the management, is because they acquired a subsidiary, and on the subsidiary, they paid a cash consideration and whatever cash consideration they've paid. And they have a contingent consideration as well, which they will be paying later. And they have a total consideration. So obviously, when you must have acquired a company, there must have been a purchase agreement. In the purchase agreement, I will get to know the total consideration you have to pay as a company. And from the purchase agreement, I will also get to know what is the underlying basis of a contingent consideration, when you will be paying the contingent consideration, so on and so forth. So I can take another document from the management, the purchase document, confirming the total consideration paid or payable, because some of the consideration was paid and some is to be payable. Purchase document confirming the total consideration paid and payable, and the underlying conditions of the contingent consideration. And the underlying conditions of contingent consideration, it is contingent, right? So what are the basis of contingent? So I can look at the purchase document. So purchase document becomes the document or becomes the information, and every information is followed by a reason, confirming, to confirm. Now, one more example. I would be needing another document from the management because they have paid a cash consideration. They've already paid a cash consideration, which is approximately $80 million. So for this cash consideration, I would take from them a document known as a bank statement. And when the management asks me why you need a bank statement, I'll say I need a bank statement to confirm the amount of the cash consideration paid. So that's the reason. And the management will say, okay, I'll give you the bank statement. If you have a solid reason, the management will give you the information. If you don't have a solid reason, you will not get the information, right? Because this is all the information which you have to take from the management only when you justify the management the need of the information. So when you write additional information, obviously the additional information is a document, number one, and you should have a reason why you need this document. But you also need to remember that when you are writing additional information, a very important rule of thumb is, just give me 1 minute. The very important rule of thumb is, when you're writing the additional information, is that the additional information, number one, has to come from case. It has to be case specific. Now, see, if I was writing an additional information on a goodwill, I was taking it from the case specific. Now, when you're writing an additional information, it should start with a document. It should start with a document because the document is the information. And then you should have a reason why you need this document, what you need to confirm from this document. So that is 1 mark, right? 1 mark per additional information. Now, if you look at an imaginative list of information, a lease agreement, a cash, a fixed asset register, a breakup of the research and development cost, they're all documents, right? So there are so many documents which you can find in the case study pertaining to the situation presented to you by the examiner. Now, you can have the due diligence report, as in the case of the goodwill, if you read later. You can have a cash book, you can have a fixed asset register, you can have a breakup of the operating expenses. These are all additional informations, right, which you need from the management in a given context. So the principal part here is the information. So you need to remember the information is a document which you will need from the management to perform your work later when you come to the audit, followed by the reason why you need this document. Reason why you need this document. Why you need this document. So that's additional information. Now, if I convert the same situation, suppose the examiner asks you on goodwill, the example we were taking, and the examiner asks you recommend the procedures on goodwill. Now, the case we read, in the same case, we know that if I am performing a procedure on goodwill, and not additional information. Now, I have given you so many times that when you are writing a good procedure should start with an action. It should have a source and it should have a purpose. And obviously, a good procedure, number one, has to be case specific. So if I am writing the procedures now, so how would I write a procedure? My procedures would be, number one, I start with the case, same case. I'm just reading it for your clarity. Acquisition of Links Company. So for the acquisition of Links Company, my first procedure would be review the board minutes. Review the board minutes to confirm the rationale and to confirm the rationale for acquisition, why you acquired it, and the approval. See, now what's the difference between an additional information and a procedure? The procedure starts with an action. Review, action. It starts with an action and it has a source, board minutes. It was the source, and it has a reason. Confirm was the reason. So it has a source, it has a purpose. The next, they acquired a subsidiary, Links, and they have to pay they have paid $80 million and they have to pay another contingent consideration few years later. So I can say, okay, review the purchase agreement. Review the purchase agreement to confirm the total amount of consideration to be paid, including the contingent consideration and its basis, including the contingent consideration and its basis. See, I started again with review. It becomes a procedure. The procedure has to start with an action. That's very important. Now, my third procedure would be that I would review the bank statement to confirm the amount of cash consideration paid. That is $80 million in the context of the case. So review, see it starting with a action. So it has to start with an action. The actions are what? You know the actions. The actions are either you review something, you recalculate something, or you discuss something, you analyze something, etc. Action. You need to start a procedure with an action, and every procedure should have a source. It should have a purpose. Every of my procedure had a source, a purchase agreement. It has a source, a bank statement. It has a reason, confirm. It has a reason, confirm. So I'm not deviating you from the rules of a good procedure. And obviously, every procedure is worth 1 mark per procedure if it is a good procedure, right? If it is a bad procedure, then you might get a 0.5 or a 0 goodwill. So a same situation, right? So you should know how you start writing additional information and how you write a procedure. Obviously, these are two different questions in the AAA paper in two different contexts, but I'm just taking one example and converting them so that you learn how you take a start. So for a procedure, you take a start from an action, and from an information, you take a start from the information. See, I didn't put a verb. I started directly with a document. So that's additional information, right? And it's very common in the question number 1 prior to September 18 exams. And it's very common in a question on a due diligence. A lot of time examiner asks you, recommend the additional information. You should need to perform your work on due diligence. Okay, now the same example on evidence. Suppose you get a question in exam on goodwill, but this time the question on goodwill is asking you to write evidence in the working paper file. So we have the scenario, the same scenario we're using so far, goodwill, and suppose the examiner asks you, explain the evidence. Explain the evidence you should expect to find in the review of your working papers on goodwill. So you are a manager, right? And you're reviewing the working papers on goodwill. What evidence will you expect to find in the working papers? Now, the question on evidence comes at the stage of finalization when you are finalizing the audit. So it's a finalization and a completion stage of the audit when the manager performs a review of working paper. So when the manager is performing a review of the working papers, what evidence will he expect to find in the file of his subordinate, like a senior? Senior has worked on goodwill. What evidence will you expect to find? Now, when you're writing the evidence in the working paper file in the exam, and suppose the topic you need to perform evidence is goodwill, now the first evidence the manager would expect to find in your working papers would be a copy of the board minutes. Now see how I started it? The copy of the board minutes to confirm the approval and the rationale, and you continue writing the full statement after, the same as we wrote above. Copy. See, the moment I brought the word copy. See, I started writing information with a document. I started writing a procedure with a verb review. And I started writing evidence with a word copy because the board minutes belongs to the management. So when I put it in my working paper file, I have to take a photocopy of that and put it in my file. The next, number 2. I need to have a copy again because I had another document. I need to have a copy of the purchase agreement to confirm, and you write the same reason I wrote above. Or you can have extracts of the purchase agreement, copy or extract, because it's an agreement. So not just you have a copy, you can also have an extract of the agreement. So that what will be in your working paper? In your working paper, either you will have a copy of the agreement or you will have the extracts of the agreement. So if you don't want to write the word copy, you can also write the word extracts of the purchase agreement. That's also valid. So that's a working paper of the auditor, right? Extracts of the agreement. Okay, the last thing, we had a bank statement, so we can have a copy again of the bank statement. Copy of the bank statement, and we come across with the same reason to confirm. So the manager will look at the copy of the bank statement, and what will the manager confirm from the bank statement, and the reason same. See how it started. Now, obviously, this is not a class where I'll give you all the forms of working paper. In my normal lectures, in my routine lectures, which I do for my full classes, I give you every form of working paper. Currently, you're looking at a copy and an extract. There are so many other forms of working paper, right? Like results, like breakups. But again, this is just a quick session just to give you a clarity between writing things, how you write things like a working paper, additional information, and a procedure. Same situation. See the forms. Now, when you're writing evidence, the rules for evidence remains the same. Again, the evidence has to be case specific. You cannot get evidence out of the case. You need to start evidence with a working paper. Starts with a working paper. Now, the working paper starts with working paper. So it starts with the working paper, either a copy or an extract. And there are so many other forms of working paper which I cannot cover in the situation today. Start with a working paper. And then it should have a reason. It should have a reason for the working paper. Why the working paper is in your file? What it is confirming. And every working paper is worth, every evidence is worth 1 mark. 1 mark per evidence you write in the working paper. So that's how you go down with it. So there are different ways of how you pick. Now, when you look at the examiner answer, this is a frequently asked question, and I want to address that before I come to the action. There's a frequently asked question that when you see examiner answers, this is a student asking, open the inverted comma, when I see the examiner answer, examiner writes procedures in an evidence question, or in a procedure question writes evidences, or when writing additional information, examiner even writes evidences. Bracket, inverted commas close. Sorry. And the student becomes confused. Now, examiner holds lots of tutor conferences in which the examiner interacts with the tutors who are teaching the subject matter. And examiner provides them clarity. After every 2 years, there is one conference between the examiner and the tutor. And in those conferences, the examiner makes things clear when the tutor asks a question like such to the examiner, that we get a question from a student and the student seems confused on this. What's the clarity? The examiner says, firstly, the examiner says, my answers, this is my means examiner, right? Examiner says, first of all, my answers are tutorial guidance, don't get distracted with them. The tutorial guidance, so they can include anything. Number 2, examiner says there is a thin line between all 3 of them, means information, procedures, and evidences. Examiner says there's a thin line between them, right? It was just changing the start, rest remains the same. So examiner says there is a thin line. So examiner says, I would not penalize too harshly a student who in a procedure answer writes evidence, or the vice versa. Now, for example, examiner is saying, suppose you're writing additional information, right? You're writing additional information on goodwill, just as we wrote above. And you know that the additional information needs to start with a document. And mistakenly, when you were writing the additional information, you started writing the additional information like review the board minutes. In the next, you wrote purchase agreement, which is fine. And in the next, you wrote bank statement. That's perfectly fine. And you come out of the exam hall and you realize, oh, I wrote a procedure and then I wrote the information. Examiner is saying, I will not penalize you harshly if you do a mistake. So in an additional information question, where you were writing 3 informations, mistakenly one of them was a procedure. Examiner is saying, I will not penalize too harshly. But if you write all 3 procedures in a question on additional information, that is wrong. Mistakenly, you wrote one procedure and you wrote the other like information, that's fine. So examiner is saying, I will not penalize you too heavily for that. Take another example. bring this down. Take another example. You were writing uh, additional information on goodwill. The first point you started with review, which technically is wrong, but examiner is saying I will not penalize you too harshly because there is a thin line. In the next, you wrote purchase agreement. Mistakenly, in the third, you wrote copy of the bank statement, which by default is a evidence, but you wrote that in additional information. Again, the examiner would not penalize you harshly for it because eventually, at the end of the day, you can still find the information. Can you still find the information? Yes. Bank statement is the information. Agreement is the information. Minutes is the information. But you started it wrongly. Mistakenly, you started it with a verb review. Mistakenly, you started it with the word copy. And you come out of the exam hall and you are stressful. No need to be stressful. Examiner is saying I will not penalize you too harshly because there is a very thin line between how you write an information procedure and an evidence. But the better rule is stick to the rules. You should know that an information should start with an information. You should know the procedure should start with the verb action. You should know that the evidence should start with something like a copy and an extract, and the list goes on. Try not to do the mistakes. But if you do, don't be worried. So mistakenly, when you are writing a procedure, you write the word copy. Mistakenly, when you were writing evidence, suppose you're writing evidence on goodwill. You are writing evidence on goodwill. Suppose this is a question on evidence on goodwill. And you know the evidence has to start with copy, extract, or something like that. And mistakenly you said review the board minutes. Now that's a procedure, but examiner says he will not penalize you too harshly. You wrote a purchase agreement, but mistakenly you forgot to write the word copy of a purchase agreement. Examiner will not penalize you too harshly for that. And you wrote the word copy of a bank statement, which is a wonderful evidence. So if you do mistakes, 1 and 2 in your answer, that's fine. But don't make a habit that examiner is asking you to write evidence and you purposely write all procedures. Examiner is asking you to write procedures and you purposely write all evidences. Don't do that. Penalize too harshly means mistakes. 1 and 2 mistakes in your answer. Mistakenly, you overlap procedures with evidence, or you overlap evidence with procedures or additional information. That's perfectly fine. But stick to the rules. Stick to the rules. So that's how you go about in exam paper for additional information, for procedures, and for evidence, which is a regular feature of your 100 marks paper. Now the last thing, which is more easier, actions. Actions has no relevance to what we just did on goodwill. So I need to do an extra exercise for actions. Now when you come across actions, you must have seen this word in ethical and professional issues and quality control issues even. Examiner asks you recommend actions. Actions can come in a reporting question. Actions can come in an ethical, professional, and a quality control question. So actions is a very regular feature of exam paper where the examiner asks you recommend actions necessary in the context of the case. Now you should know action should start with verb. Action should start with a verb, right? Like discuss, like review. It should start with an action, right? You're writing an action. So how can an action start without action? Verb, discuss, review. But you need to understand the purpose, and you need to understand the difference between a procedure and actions, because examiner says students are confused between writing procedures and actions because both starts with action. Procedure starts with an action, action starts with an action, but the purpose is different. Action procedure is performed to gather evidence, review the board minutes. So procedure is performed to gather evidence, but action is performed to resolve an issue. That is why it comes in an ethical issue, professional issue, quality control issue question, or it comes in a reporting question where you have to solve an issue prior to issuing a qualified opinion, or you need to solve an issue with the management prior to issuing an adverse opinion. Action is performed to resolve an issue. That is why it comes in a reporting question where you have an issue and you need to resolve it prior to issuing a qualified opinion. It comes in a reporting question, or it comes in an ethical, professional, and a quality control issue question. EPQ, ethical professional quality control issues. Action. So action and procedure both starts with action, because obviously you need to start them with actions. But the difference is the purpose. The purpose you perform a procedure, and the purpose you perform a action. So when you write actions, the basic purpose of an action is to resolve an issue. So when you write an action, again, the actions have to be taken in the context of case. So whatever is the problem in the case, you need to see that. Then you need to take an action to resolve the problem, And the action can, actions, because most of the time the action is that you need to discuss with management. So mostly actions starts with uh, discuss, because how would you resolve a problem? You will only resolve a problem when you discuss with management, or you resolve a problem when you discuss with those charged with governance. You will resolve a problem when you discuss it with the audit committee. These are how you resolve things up, right? So mostly discussion seems like a very good action, but yes, actions can also be review. You review something, etc. But when we're performing procedures, there are so many procedures. We observe, we recalculate, we analyze, we discuss. Even discuss is a procedure. The purpose of a procedure is to gather evidence. So when you're writing an action, the focal point of an action is that you are taking an action to resolve the problem. Keep that in mind. And again, you get 1 mark per action. Now, even the safeguards you take in an ethical issues, safeguards when you write ethical issues is also an action. Safeguard is also an action. So when you're attempting a question on ethical, professional, and quality control issues, you give a lot of recommendations even, which are part of your actions. So this is just a basic idea. The purpose of this session was not to teach you something. The purpose of this session was just to discuss with you. A lot of time the student face problems in exam paper when it comes across writing additional information, or writing procedures, or writing evidence, or writing actions. You need to understand the 100 marks paper will have 2 of them, 3 of them, 1 of them in every exam setting. It's better you understand the difference. And even if you do a mistake, as I was guiding you above, examiner will not penalize you too harshly, but know the fundamentals, how you start a procedure, how you start an evidence, how you start an action, how you start an information. You should know those fundamentals, right? So you can again reach me on my different social media presence if you have any queries relating to this topic. I will be more than welcome to resolve them in the constraint of the time I have as a tutor. And the purpose of this session was just to guide you about some clarities which can really be helpful at this point in time when exams are near, and that can helpful to you in resolving some of your confusions you have in writing these things in the AAA paper. So I'm Kashif Kamran, signing off from this session, which was to bring clarity on the issues students face in the AAA paper. And I'll be coming back with more such sessions to bring clarity ahead of your exams coming up. Till then, take good care of yourself, study effectively. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.